Here's something you may have missed this week. On a South Lawn in Washington, a president stopped before boarding his helicopter to Las Vegas and said something that, if you were paying close attention, reframed almost everything happening in the world right now. He said, I might go, yeah. Pakistan, he said he might go to Pakistan. Consider what that means for a moment. Not a state visit, not a scheduled diplomatic summit with months of advanced preparation and formal invitations and joint communiques drafted by career Foreign Service officers. A president of the United States in passing, almost casually suggesting he might fly to Islamabad to sign what could be one of the most significant nuclear agreements in a generation. If the deal holds, if the talks go the way he says they're going, that's the thread. Because here's the thing about I might go, it only makes sense if someone already told him it was close enough to go. The White House says a second round of U.S. to Iran. Talks is very likely to be held in Islamabad, and Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt described Pakistan as the only mediator in ongoing negotiations between Washington and Tehran. The only mediator, not Turkey, not Qatar, not the UAE, countries that have spent years cultivating relationships on both sides of this conflict. Pakistan. So why Pakistan? To understand that, you have to understand the geometry of this particular crisis. Pakistan's Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir was in Tehran on Thursday, meeting the Iranian Parliament Speaker, then President Masoud Pezeshkian, then the operational commander of the Revolutionary Guard Corps, all in a single day. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif was traveling to Saudi Arabia and Qatar, pushing for regional alignment on the same question from the other direction. Two Pakistani leaders, two tracks, moving simultaneously through the most combustible diplomatic terrain on earth. This is not improvised. This is choreographed. Now, let's go back a little further. Vice President J.D. Vance led a U.S. delegation to Islamabad just last weekend for direct talks with Iranian officials and came away empty-handed. That's the detail that the headlines mostly swallowed and moved past. Empty-handed. The first round failed. And yet here we are days later with Trump publicly declaring that Iran has agreed to almost everything, including, he claims, handing over its stockpile of enriched uranium. Notice the gap between those two facts. Failed talks on Saturday. Almost everything agreed by Thursday. Something happened in between. Something that moved the needle dramatically in less than a week on a nuclear standoff that has defined American foreign policy for over 2 decades. The U.S. president said Iran had agreed to give up what he called the nuclear dust, his term for the enriched uranium stockpile that, if further processed, could be used to build a weapon. He said the U.S. naval blockade of Iranian-linked ships through the Strait of Hormuz had been a very powerful factor in bringing Tehran to the table, and he tied it all together, the bombing campaign, the blockade, the back-channel negotiations, as a coordinated strategy finally bearing fruit. Iran's version of events is different, significantly different. It remains unclear whether Trump's remarks reflect genuine back-channel progress or are a pressure tactic ahead of the April 22nd ceasefire deadline. Trump and Iran's descriptions paint completely different pictures of the same negotiations. That discrepancy matters. Because one of these two pictures is wrong, and the April 22nd deadline is 4 days away. Here is what we know. Pakistan holds a position in this diplomatic architecture that no other country does. It has working relationships with both Washington and Tehran, relationships built not on ideology but on geography, on debt, on necessity. Trump praised Pakistan's top civilian and military leadership explicitly, calling the Prime, Minister and Field Marshal, very outstanding personalities, language that, from this president, is not casual. That's an endorsement. That's a signal. That's a signal. And here's the part that should concern all of us, or at the very minimum, make all of us pay closer attention. The location of a potential signing matters. Islamabad is not Geneva. It is not a neutral diplomatic stage with centuries of precedent. It sits at the crossroads of South Asian power, bordered by India to the east, Afghanistan to the west, and China to the north. Amid the Hormuz blockade, Trump has been softening his tone on Beijing ahead of a scheduled visit. China, which has its own deep economic and strategic ties to both Iran and Pakistan, has been largely quiet throughout these negotiations. conspicuously quiet. A deal signed in Islamabad is not just a deal between the United States and Iran. It is a statement about where the center of global diplomacy now sits, and who exactly is sitting just off camera when the pens come out. The ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran expires April 22nd. A second round of talks is expected this weekend. The White House has indicated that a temporary extension of the truce won't be necessary, and Trump expressed hope the deal could be finalized without one. Whether that optimism survives contact with reality remains the question no one on either side can currently answer. What we don't know yet is what Iran actually agreed to, if anything, behind closed doors. We don't know what Pakistan was promised in exchange for its role as sole mediator. We don't know whether China's silence reflects acceptance, preparation, or something else entirely. What we do know is that a president said, "I might go," on a Thursday afternoon, and that the whole architecture of a nuclear negotiation appeared to shift quietly in the span of a week. Watch Islamabad. Watch what happens this weekend. The story isn't over. It's just getting to the part where things click.